Hello and welcome to another episode of Tejano Keyboard. Last time we had an episode, we talked about some accordion tricks that you could use. And then after that, I put out a video having you guys send us questions and see if we can answer them. We ended up getting some here. One of them here from Donald. Donald was asking about how to play a G in a different inversion, different voicing, I think is what he was referring to. So let me start off by saying that no one inversion is kind of like a go-to inversion, at least for me. But I like trying to do different stuff with voicing. So in the context, I think what he's trying to say is G major at the end of a cadence, meaning the key of G, G major, like the final chord, or at least the root chord, like when you're trying to go to something. The G that I would play is always dependent on whatever chord is leading it. So in most Tejano music arrangements, typically it'll be coming from the 5 chord, which would be D7 or dominant, D dominant. So there's different ways to voice that. So for example, if we were to voice D dominant like that, okay, if we were to voice it like that, okay, we then from there I would try to pick the least amount of moving to get to the next chord, because that creates a sense of direction in leading to the next chord. So the next chord would be G. So if we were to go from this chord, sorry, from that, and this is actually a 7, 9, there's a major third, and this is 13. So this is really a D13. From there I'd probably do something like that, okay? And what that is just a G major 7th. Sometimes if I'm playing it in my left hand because I'm playing a lead in the right hand, what I would do is just voice that, which there's not even a G in there, but because there's a bass player, the G is implied, you know, the bass. That's why I play it with 2 hands like that. But this right here would be, here's your major third, your 5th, major 7th, and 9th. So actually it's a major 9th, it's not a major 7th, it's a major 9th. In the right hand I just hit 1 in major 7. Even that would be acceptable. So that right there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it'd be an add 6 or major 13th, something like that. Another voicing that you could use is a fourth voicing. So but that would mean that you would have to lead to it with other fourth voicing. So one that I like to use, or the easiest way for me to remember how to make the chords, is to start on the note that you want to be on. So in this case G, and then go down fourth. So D, A, E, B, F sharp. It's kind of a big open sounding chord right there. Sometimes I'll play it like this. Once again, so basically what I did was took that chord and I took the octave on the top and brought it down to the major 7th, okay, and the G's implied in the bass. Sometimes it sounds nice in that lower octave too. Okay, so how would I get to that? So we could do, like, let's see, that's kind of too low for that. So let's try here. Okay, so this would be a D, I'm sorry, A minor 7th, which is your 2 chord in G. then that right there is a D dominant, right? And then from there you could do, okay, so we went, sorry about that bottom note. The other thing that I'd like to do as far as fourth voicings to land on that, I'll try to get into some of the analysis, but basically what I do with my left hand is I start on the, okay, so the way I think of it, so I can always remember, is start on the, and this is a 2-5-1 cadence. So I start on a C, which is the 4 chord up here, and I go chromatically down, and then I go to that, okay, in my right hand, okay? I know that sounds kind of weird, but I'll explain to you how this is a G chord, okay? Okay? So in my other hand, I'll go like this, sorry, it'll be like this. Okay, one more time. Okay, or even that. Okay, so what I'm doing here, this is A minor. You've got the A, 1, 2, 3, 4, so that's an 11. There's your dominant 7. There's your flat 3, which makes it a minor. And this right here is the 5. Okay. And then when I go to this, okay, that D, that dominant right there, we have the 1, the flat 7, the 3rd, 13, and then that would be flat 9. Okay, so it's a D13 flat 9, and then that right there, well, let's start from the top and go down. So we got the 5th, the 9th, the 13th, or add 6 because it's not a dominant chord, so you add the 6th, and then you've got the major 3rd, major 7th, and then the bass is implied there. So, oops. Let's see, what was I doing? And then okay. Which leads me to another question. The question was about tritones, okay, and how to use them in Tejano music. Well, I think what the person was referring to is you hear a lot of these gospel guys playing, and they're talking about tritones, and I don't think that they're using the proper terminology as far as like how to use a tritone or what a tritone is. So a tritone is essentially the interval of a flat 5, okay? So like in the case of C, you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you lower it, okay? Now there's only 6 sets of tritone neighbors, let's just call them, because they're even like a flat 5th away from F sharp or G flat, however you want to call it. Let's call it F sharp, okay? So you go F sharp, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B, C sharp. So there's a 5th. The flat 5th is C again. So okay. So that's what a tritone is. There's 12 notes in the scale, so if there's 2 neighbors to one tritone shape, half of 12 is 6, so there's only 6. F sharp and C are 1, G and C sharp, so on and so forth, and then you start over again right there. Okay. So how do you use the tritone? Well, a tritone, you can find it in a dominant chord, okay? So the interval between the 3 and the flat 7 is a tritone, okay? Because Well, here, I'll show you. So for example, there's a regular C major chord, right? When you get to make it a dominant seventh, you have a flat, a B flat in there. A flat seven is a B flat. Okay, so if you take out all the other notes, there's your tritone, okay? Okay. So in a dominant chord, in my opinion at least, I think the most important interval to let people know that you're playing a dominant chord is the tritone between the 3 and the 7. Because if I were to play, let's say, 2-5-1 and F, right? So it's going to be G minor, and then we'll get to the C7, and then F, okay? So if I were to just play those two notes, that interval of, let's see, E and B flat, which is the tritone within the key of C sharp, I'm sorry, C7, dominant 7, you can already hear the chord. It's already implied. So see, now let's take that one, that same C7, and I'll leave out the tritone, and I'll just play the 1 and 5, and it'll sound so bland. So listen. See that right there? That could have been a minor chord. So the third has to be in there to make sure that people know that it's major, and then the flat 7 has to know that it's in there to be dominant. Okay? But if we were to leave everything else out, that right there, you can hear it. It lets you know where it's going, at least to my ear, and it's voice leading, because the E can resolve to an F, the B flat can resolve to an A. So you have hear how that feels, and even in the voicing that I use in F right there, that's, you've got the E going to the F, got the B flat going to the A. Okay. Now there's another thing called tritone substitutions, where you can play another chord based on its the root note relative to another tritone. So let me try to break that down. So for example, let's keep using C, the dominant C. So it's this one, still the C7, C dominant 7th, okay? The difference here is going to be that instead of worrying about this tritone interval, we're going to make a new tritone interval out of the bass note. So in this case, the tritone to C is F sharp. Okay, I know that sounds kind of weird, but let's take out the C right here, because we're going to substitute it for F sharp. So in that case, we'd have something like this. Is that right? Yes. So we can go like this. Okay, that's a tritone substitution, because we are actually substituting the F sharp, or sorry, the C for the F sharp. Okay, so let's say if we were to use a different voicing, like this voicing, which is flat 5 raised 9. Okay, so if we were to go, that's a flat 5 raised 9 in C dominant. Okay, but if we were to change the root note to F sharp, the F sharp is the tritone substitution for C, right? So we could go, okay. There's a lot of other cool things that we could talk about as far as tritones, but I'll save that for another video. I think I already made a video about that, but it's good to revisit it now that I'm trying a different setup. Anyway, so the last question came from Nano, and Nano was asking about keyboard brands and splits. Well, I've always been of the school of thought that whatever is on the front of the keyboard doesn't mean as much as what's behind the keyboard, and that's the keyboardist, right? Because you can get the most talented keyboard player in the world and have them play on a Walmart keyboard, and they'll still make it sound awesome because they know what they're doing. So I feel that it's more important to hone your skills more than it is to worry about brands. That being said, me personally, I've played on a few different brands. I actually started off playing a Casio because that's what I could afford when I was very young. But as I've progressed, I've owned the original Elisa's Quadra synth. I've owned a couple Rolands, but primarily right now I'm fully Korg, and I'm obviously not saying that for any endorsement or anything, because if anything else came along that suited my needs better than what I have right now, then I would go that direction. But I like the sounds that the Rolands have, especially the early 90s Rolands. They have that really cool brass, you know, especially if you layered it with octaves or something like that. Yamahas, I like Yamahas. They have some nice sounding pianos, especially since they were the front runners for a lot of the electric pianos that we use now. You know, they're all based off of the DX7 sound, which was one of the most famous digital synths ever. But nowadays, you know, with modern synthesis and sampling, there's a lot of cool stuff that you can do. I like Korg for a couple different reasons. I feel like the interface is easy to understand, and I can just dive in and edit it real quick. And they were one of the first keyboard manufacturers that had touch screen, so the menus, I mean, although there were a lot of pages to them, it was easier to find out how to do things, reading manuals and whatnot, but it was laid out in a way that made sense. And now my current keyboard is the Kronos, which is basically an evolutionary step in, you know, in all the Korg keyboards, starting with the Trinity, the Triton, what else came, the M3, and the Oasis. All those keyboards all kind of had the same layout and the same menu setup, so it was really easy. Like if you were an early Korg adopter, then it makes sense. There's also some really cool features that I like off of the Korgs that I have never seen any of the other keyboard manufacturers do, and maybe they've changed since then, but I haven't really been in the market for looking for a keyboard for a while because, well, I've got what I need. But earlier on, what I used to like to do was, at least with the Trinity series and with the Triton series, was that there was a way that you could layer the sounds, and like, say for example, if we're playing like a J Pettis tune, right, and or anything that has like a lead alto sax, when you layer a sax over the brass and you play like 2 notes or 3 notes or a whole chord, it's like you have however many fingers. Like say I'm pressing a 4-note chord, it's like you have 4 saxophones. But when you're playing with a real sax player, the saxophone player can only play 1 note at a time. Okay, so what I would do is that I would set up my saxophone patch. I would make like a user saxophone patch that was monophonic, meaning that you could only play 1 note at a time. Now, this is where Korg, I feel, differs from everybody else, is that most monophonic algorithms on the keyboards will only pick up on the last note that you hit, okay? With the Korgs, you can actually have it set to the high note priority, or a low note priority. So what that means is if I hit like a whole bunch of notes at once, that the top note will be what the saxophone plays, which is cool, because then when I play like, you know, like a The sax part will just be, oops. I'll have to set up my keyboard sometime so you guys can hear it, but this is just, you know, my computer setup right here. So that was one thing that I used to do a lot, but I've kind of shied away from doing that because although it does make it sound a little bit more realistic, a sampled sax is still a sampled sax. It's not, you know, it doesn't sound like the real thing. I mean, it gets closer, but... So the other question was about splits. If yay or nay, I say, well, it depends on what you are trying to do. Okay. Once again, I'm not advocating for Korg or anything specific, but I do have to say that I do like the new Kronos has the, I forgot what they call it, but you can switch a sound and still hold down the keys, and that sound still keeps on playing, so there's no dropout when you do it. And it's the sound, the effects, everything. And you can hit that one note and keep playing all around it until you release that note or you release a sustain or whatever. But that's cool because it helps with being able to switch between patches. So if you're a keyboard player that does not mind setting up a bunch of stuff, I say go for it, right? Me, with my band, I run sound, I roadie, I do everything too, just with, you know, with everyone else in the band. And so I do not have the luxury of setting up 2, 3, 4 keyboards. Okay. The other thing too that I think about, this has always been my logic, is that you only have 2 arms. Okay. So if you only have 2 arms, the most keyboards you should have are 2 keyboards, because I mean, at any given time, if you need 2 sounds, those are your 2 sounds. You can't get a third sound. Like, you're not going to grow an arm out of your neck and start playing something else, you know, unless you're playing with your feet, but that's a whole nother story. But I feel that because of the transitional stuff, that the sound transition stuff that Korg is doing, I'm able to split my keyboard so I can play chords in one hand, leads in the other, and when I'm done with that, I can hit another patch and go straight into a full keyboard, or if I want you know, piano and strings split or layered, it's just more convenient for me that way. So it's less stuff for me to set up. The Kronos is not a light keyboard, it's very heavy, and prior to that I was using an LE, a Tritone LE, and was it the best sounding keyboard? No, but it was light, it was easy to set up, and it already all the sounds were already programmed in it the way I wanted it. And you know what I have, but the LE that I have is a 61 key, as opposed to, you know, I've got a Tritone Studio that's a 76 key, I've got a Trinity V3 Pro that's a 76 key, and it was just, they were just too much to carry on the road. I mean, when I was younger, I didn't care. I would set up all of those keyboards. I would set up a bunch of stuff, but now that I'm getting older and I have my own band now, it's you know, it's a little bit harder. Well, I hope I answered you guys' questions well enough, and by all means, I don't claim to have all the answers, but what I encourage you guys is to come up with some questions, and let's try and figure out that stuff together, because I mean, we love this music, and the only way to get better is if we share the information. On that note, I encourage you guys to like and subscribe. Also, be sure to check out the website, tejanokeyboard.com. All this content will be on there, and if you guys have questions for the next video, let me know, and we will try to cover as many questions as we can. All right, thank you very much.